For over a decade, research has shown that when white subjects are rapidly shown black and white faces and good and bad words, they're more likely to associate bad words with black faces and good words with white faces.
Most white North Americans, interestingly, have more negative automatic responses to African American faces.
The test is called the Implicit Association Test, or IAT, and some believe these automatic responses are measuring unconscious attitudes. However, when the same subjects are asked explicitly to rate their preference for white or black people, most claim to be neutral. Harvard University social psychologist Mahzarin Banaji, who helped to develop the IAT, says we have two attitudes, one explicit and one implicit, and almost 80% of white Americans show implicit racial bias.
In other words, it's something that resides a little bit below the surface of conscious awareness.
Brain scans conducted on white subjects demonstrate that when white and black faces are presented but obscured behind a brief flash of light, a flash that prevents conscious awareness of the face, a part of the brain's fear center, the amygdala, detects the face subconsciously and reacts. The reaction is stronger to black faces than white faces and is strongest in those who show the greatest degree of racial bias on the IAT. Social cognitive neuroscientist Will Cunningham designed this research.
It was interesting to show that without people's necessarily conscious recognition, that they were far more biased than they were realizing. The early research really pointed us to some very pessimistic conclusions, that we had these automatic responses that appeared very uncontrollable, that we couldn't do much about.
But now, Cunningham and social cognitive neuroscientist colleague Jay Van Bavel are attempting to change these automatic biased reactions to black faces.
And so one thing we're interested in is getting rid of that. How can people have more positive automatic reactions to this group?
New developments in brain science have also fueled their research.
Our understanding of the amygdala has shifted somewhat. Yes, the amygdala was responding to negative stimuli. But interestingly, if you also showed people very, very positive stimuli, sometimes pictures of erotic nudes, for example, the amygdala also responded to that. And it appears to play more of a role, at least in some of the work that we've been doing, in detecting what's really relevant to a person.
So some of the research attempts to reduce racial bias by making race less relevant.
You're here for the study?
Yeah.
Okay, just come right this way. Grab a seat right here. Okay. And today's study, we're interested in how people learn about different groups. And you're going to be a member of the taggers for this study. So all the members of the taggers are going to be on your team. So just read the instructions and hit the space bar when you're ready to begin. Okay.
There are 8 members of the Tigers, 4 of whom are black and 4 who are white. In addition, there's another team, one the subject is not assigned to, in this case, the Lions. The Lions has the same racial makeup. The subject is simply told to become familiar with all of the faces.
We just tell them to memorize the faces the best that they can.
White people automatically see other whites as part of their in-group. But what happens when you're assigned a black teammate?
Can we bring them into the in-group and maybe give them some of the positivity that gets assigned to the in-group?
After studying the 2 teams for a few minutes, the subject begins the part that measures implicit automatic reactions. He's told to ignore faces and just hit one key if a word is good and another key if a word is bad.
When they see a word on the screen, they have half a second to decide whether this word is good or whether this word is bad. And we have half the words being good, half the words being bad.
Half the time they see members of their own team, half the time the other team. The words good and bad also switch sides, so the keys pressed for good and bad also change during testing. It's all about speed.
So we can understand what kind of immediate, automatic, gut-based response they're having to these faces. Do they feel positive towards the face or negative towards the face?
And through this simple intervention of assigning teammates, black teammates no longer produce an automatic negative reaction.
What we find is that people have more automatic positive evaluations of people who are part of their team, whether they're black or white.
Why does this happen?
Groups give us a sense of belonging, safety, and there's a lot of needs that are met as a function of belonging to groups, being able to know who's on your team and who you can count on.
White participants no longer see black teammates as part of an outgroup.
They respond to them just like they're part of their racial group.
So by changing the context, race is minimized.
And what's really important in this context, especially when we've just assigned people to groups, is figuring out who's on their team. The question, of course, is how to do this practically. We can do this for half an hour in a lab, but the world out there is much more complex.
It's important to note, however, that white members of the other team, the Lions, also receive automatic positive reactions, while black faces on the other team do not.
For the team you were not assigned to, white is still getting the positive and black is still getting the negative.
And that reminds us that skin color remains a very relevant feature in the real world.
Black and other group is still negative.
A second question concerns what happens in the brain as participants go through this implicit exercise.
If we can make your own group the most motivationally salient thing in the environment, what happens with the amygdala?
The area in orange represents the amygdala. The chart on the right shows the reactions to black and white faces on the other team, the Lions, and reactions to black and white teammates.
For the team that you don't belong to, there's still a difference in the amygdala response to the black and white faces. But for faces that are on the same team, people who you perhaps are having more of that positive emotional response with, that difference is gone. And in fact, the activation to the black faces is identical to both white faces on your team and white faces on the other team. So all it takes is being a member either of the racial in-group or the assigned in-group to bounce up that amygdala response.
These brain imaging results support those found during the automatic testing. Future research needs to examine how the brains of black subjects respond to these same conditions. And for all of us, we need to better understand how altering contexts affects the brain and behavior.
And this would maybe change our understanding of the amygdala, but also give us a new understanding of the way we might shape an emotional response to groups, and perhaps give us a new way of understanding the way we might be able to change some biases in the world.